So we're standing over here in the Gestalt Block. This is Block 1, and this is where we have the underlying land-based basalts, which are much more dense. Underneath that are the submarine basalts, but we've got this really restrictive layer of rock right underneath these roots. So right in here we're looking at about 12 to 18 inches maximum of soil depth. So what that means is that and the ripening is interrupted because the plant basically runs out of water. The trick here is that it gets mature enough to get a fully developed, fully realized wines, but it never gets the intense blackberry, black cherry fruit components, and instead this always tends to have more of the savory, gunpowder, minerality kinds of characters, that kind of wet stone character that you can get when Pinots develop like this. So biggest difference between the Gestalt blocks and the basalt blocks is rooting depth, and then of course the wind. This is a much windier part of the vineyard. Classic Pommard. This is Pommard on Riparia Gloire here in the basalt block, and this is what really drives the fruit intensity in the basalt block. So you've got relatively small clusters, as you can see, and moderate-sized berries, but bigger berries than what we saw over in Gestalt. But classic Pinot cluster, classic size, coloring fairly uniformly colored for this point in veraison. What's very telling about this site, though, is these vines have only been hedged once, and as you can see, we are done. We have no. It's veraison. This vine is shut down. It's not growing new shoots. It's not growing new leaves. All of its energy is going into that fruit, and that's what makes a great site for wine grapes. What you don't want is the plant still happily growing at this point. What you want is it focused on its reproductive cycle, on maturing this cluster. You can tell that it's completely shut down because if you look, the tendrils are all dry. The last growing shoot, the growing tip on this is actually clear down in here. The last the last two leaves are way higher than the tip. The tip is just completely shut down. The tendrils are all dropped. This vine is shut down and just waiting for harvest. All the carbohydrates at the moment are going into the fruit. They well up to about 22, somewhere between 22, 23 bricks. And then at that point, the rachis here on the cluster will completely lignify. So as you can see, the canes here are lignifying. That means they're turning from green to brown, getting pretty good lignification, which you expect it at harvest. And then that rachis will lignify. And in the perfect world, you have the vine completely shut down, you have full lignification of the rachis, and you pick grapes. Okay, Buffy, have you learned to taste grapes yet? Huh? So the soils in the basalt part, and in particular this part, these are marine sedimentary soils for the most part. So these are part of the uplifted series with some intermixing of volcanics on it. But the soils in here have a little more of a grayish tinge to them. On the other side of the hill here, where we just were, we have darker red soils, and you can see the redness in the soils up slope here, which are more Jory type soils. And that's what makes this site so interesting and allows me to make more than one Pinot off of this same site, is a difference in the soils. So here we have soils that have a little more clay in them. They actually have so fairly good water holding capacity, and the soils are fairly deep in here. We've got about 36 inches of soil in here before we hit the uplifted basalts that are underneath this. Now the basalts run laterally across here, and in the engagement block over here, the basalts are all right at the surface. So that's what's fascinating about a place like Brittan Vineyards, where you've got 25 feet over there, you've got rocks on the surface, and down here the rocks are 18 to 36 inches below the surface. And so you get a vine that's able to grow clusters that look like this, that have huge fruit intensity in them.
Tell me about the flavor that you get from this particular combination of clone and this soil.
So Pommard Pommard for me is sort of the classic underpinnings of all the great Oregon wines. It tends to give you more feminine wines, in my opinion. It gives you wines that have really pretty elegance and structure and these very pretty colors in their flavors. So you see, for example, up in the Dundee Hills, you see Pommard giving these light, almost strawberry flavored or tinged wines that have real power behind them. Here, out here in the Linville AVA, with and especially on this site, we get black fruit intensity out of Pommard. So this is where the blackberry and black cherry characters come from in our basalt wine, with huge intensity, much more than you would get out of a Pommard most places. But it's a little lighter in the palate. It's a little softer, as it were, in the texture of the palate, because it's Pommard as opposed to 667 or 777.